a content developer is missing, and tens of people have started to take notice. Nobody knows what happened, but turn to the one silent witness who sees all and never lies. The search is on, and the trail will lead investigators onto a pathway into the dark world of generative adversarial networks. And what they discover is enough to make them doubt anything the camera ever shows them again.
Welcome back. The aforementioned Generative Adversarial Networks, or GANs, represents one of the most exciting frameworks in all of deep learning today. A properly trained generative network can create or map new content based primarily on a series of inputs and a set of pre-trained parameters. Style transfer, synthetic prose, deepfakes, synthetic people, and worlds all become easily created on commodity hardware and will undoubtedly become much more commonplace in the near future. Remember a few years ago when NVIDIA demoed a slew of synthetic images of people that were eerily believable? That was a great way to introduce people to the power of these high-ordered generative networks. But first, let's talk about their origins. In 2014, Ian Goodfellow and a group of valuable contributors who suffer from not being the first name in the authors list presented a paper simply entitled Generative Adversarial Nets. In this landmark paper, they presented a framework for creating and parameterizing a generative network by having it participate in a two-network game, if you will. The post-game state of these networks can then be utilized to solve problems in multiple domains. But let's start our tour at the 10,000-foot level. On one side of the game board, we have the discriminator. And it's the discriminator's destiny to become trained to predict the probability that something belongs to a specific class. For now, this network will be presented as a black box. Further, let's say that this black box wants to become really good at recognizing images of cats. Well, the first thing we would do would be to present it with a large set of images of things that are cats, and optionally some labeled as not cats. Over time, the discriminator would reduce its prediction error through one of several methods of loss reduction that we've discussed at a high level in some earlier videos. But it's effectively a technique for a network to become iteratively less wrong over time. NVIDIA has stated that it takes typically 50,000 to 100,000 good quality and well-distributed images to train a highly accurate discriminator. Once it has been trained to most successfully identify which images are of cats, we can turn our attention to its adversary, the generator. Now, it's the generator's job to trick the discriminator into believing that the image it is presenting is that of a cat, and that will be represented by this blue box over here. As with the discriminator, it is a deep network with many hidden layers, but its loads of hyperparameters hidden deep within its layers can be initialized with garbage in this case. And let's take the inputs to this network as arbitrary constants for now. Now, an image produced by this network will be, for lack of better terms, just garbage. And when that garbage image is presented to the discriminator, it will be judged unquestionably non-cat. But by adjusting the hyperparameters and presenting a new resultant image, it will either be closer to or further away from, well, catness. Again, by iterating and reducing loss, the generator network will gradually generate images closer and closer to what the discriminator believes is a cat. Once a threshold of success has been reached, the generator's network will most likely have produced a believable image of a cat, at least believable to the discriminator. But here's the best part. This cat may or may not have ever existed in any of the discriminator's training data. It is a generated and purely synthetic cat. Now, this idea of pitting two agents against one another in a Turing test-style tug of war, like the creation of the infinite improbability drive, was very clever in its simplicity. They have figured out a simple way to brute force solve a classifier's inverse in an entirely automated way. I mean, that's just great thinking and great stuff. And generative networks, no matter how they are created, have the potential to create new content given only a set of inputs. And look at the GPT-3, the Generative Pre-trained Transformer, a deep network with billions and billions of internal parameters. And given a starting point, it can create very convincing, long-winded drivel like anything you'd find anywhere on the internet. Now, so far we've intentionally presented a vast oversimplification of the GAN concept where we showed images as inputs, outputs in our sample networks, but now let's drill down one more level and talk about features instead of images. Now, features are important characteristics, the significant aspects, if you will, that can be extracted from sources that you can use to more meaningfully categorize and differentiate them. See, a traditional raster image is simply a 2D matrix of pixels that, while on its own, is not necessarily the most accurate way to describe the picture. To do so, we need to look at which features are hiding in that image. And the more independent and contextually significant we can make the features we provide the discriminator and the generator, the more accurate and reliable those networks will become at categorizing the provided input and generating the desired result respectively. So recently Intel made some big news using this method to create a style transfer network that maps input GTA 5 images to a new image based on data trained from different sources. But was it a straight image-to-image transfer? No. They used a slew of different features to train and evaluate their networks, such as the depth buffer data that was generated when rendering the image, entity segmentation, sort of identifying, labeling what's in the image, normal data, and many other things that were really helping to identify what is in the picture. Now, seriously, one could do an entire series of videos on feature selection and engineering and even more about how Intel integrated the architecture into a standard rendering pipeline, but this won't be that series. So now that we've seen some of the features that they found sufficiently descriptive, let's look at how the discriminator is trained. Intel attempted to match GTA 5 input images to different training sets of data. And, as one would expect, based on which training set of data was used, the paired generator ended up applying a very different style to the source image. Some of the training sets didn't provide much of a boost, but the generator that honed its edge against the discriminator trained with the Cityscapes dataset, wow. I mean, they've basically created a deepfake GTA 5. And at a software level, and even with some hardware support, this process will still be relatively heavy. I mean, don't expect it to necessarily appear with all of its bells and whistles on your console at 60 FPS in the next few months. On the other hand, as we've seen from the rapid pace of DLS's progress, scalable hardware-supported deep learning is more and more in the realm of practicality. So it's definitely coming on the horizon. And what else can these generative networks be used for? Well, how about creating new content? Or upscaling images? Or new deepfake generators? So the world of generative networks is a very exciting one, and one of its most important inhabitants is the GAN framework. From style transfer to realistic content generation, the mind boggles at what might be accomplished. I mean, it's not a magic bullet, to be certain, but with thoughtful usage it can become a defining technology. I strongly suspect that, including NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel's great work, we've just begun to see its potential, and have yet to see its full impact on DirectML at the least, and DirectX at the most. There is so much more, and there are so many levels beyond this that we could dive into, each worthy of its own attention and video. But for now, that's our high-level and somewhat hand-wavy explanation of generative adversarial networks. If you were given infinite resources, training data, and time, what would you do with such a technology framework? Please leave a comment below and let us know. Also, feel free to add any questions or suggestions. And if you like this video and would be interested in seeing more, please consider liking it, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell. It would be greatly appreciated and really helps out a lot. Thanks for watching.